Okay, well, what do you guys think? Should we maybe get started soon? I think we are 6 minutes past 5.
It's going to be recorded anyway, so people can always catch up with what they missed.
Sure thing.
All right, John, go ahead.
Okay, so yes, first and foremost, I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for attending today's event. My name is Jonathan Harwell. I am a co-president for JETAASC, or the JET Alumni Association of SoCal and Arizona. And I will be the moderator for today's event, a very Japanese book reading in English with Sarah Dzida and Natalie Hamilton. And so before we begin, I would like to just give a very quick introduction of our organization. Then I'll follow up I'll give the rest of the time to Sarah and Natalie for their event. So first and foremost, yes, I want to talk a little bit about the JET program, which we're all proud alumni of. The JET program, it's one of the world's largest government-sponsored Japanese language exchange programs, and there are currently more than 55 countries around the world who participate in this exchange program, and this presents an opportunity for great, unique cultural exchange and to meet people from all around the world while living and working in Japan. Specifically with this organization, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we're composed of former JET participants. And our organization's mission is to enrich the lives of JET alums and to support the productive relationships made from our time on the JET program, and to foster and promote flourishing relationships with Japan, Japanese culture, as well as the local Nikkei communities. So yeah, that's a little bit about our organization here. And so now I'm going to share my screen and we can get started with some introduction.
And for anybody, for anybody in Australia, the word SoCal, I think it stands for Southern California. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, thank you for that.
Like a jargon.
We want to be inclusive, yes.
American
Southern California, correct, yes.
Thank you.
Fun fact about California, California is the land mass of California is about equivalent to the size of Japan as a fun fact. Okay, let me share my screen and we can get started. Okay, so yes, welcome to our event. And I will first like to introduce our first author, Sarah Dzida. Sarah Dzida, she writes across different genres and mediums, and her writing has appeared online and in print, including the Huffington Post, Architecture and Design Museum, and the Hollywood Fringe Festival. For several years, she worked as a martial arts book editor. When not writing, Sarah is an award-winning UX and strategy consultant who builds innovative digital products and interactive experiences.
はじめまして。
よろしくお願いします。Her book, Dearest Enemy, A Friendship, is her first published book, and it's an inventive poetry hybrid memoir inspired by real correspondence and that she wrote with a friend while living as a JET in Oita Prefecture. And the two friends just happened to write to each other as if they were enemies. And there's a lot of wordplay, and it ends with a wedding.
Yes, it does. It's a very happy story. Lots of love. Right. So I'm going to kick off by reading my piece first.
Okay.
So, okay. So as John said, I'm going to be reading a piece from my book, Dearest Enemy. And in honor of the fact that I'm reading with Natalie, I chose the piece that has the most kanji in it. So we're going to start here.
Yay.
Okay. The piece is called Calligraphy. When I first arrived in Japan, I wanted to study the art of kanji. So I joined the high school calligraphy club. At the end of each school day, students and I would gather in a designated classroom to learn from the shodo teacher. From my lesson, she taught me the simplest character and stroke. Ichi, meaning one. Because rote is the favored teaching methodology in this country, students often drill exercises under the critical eye of a teacher. Then after subordinating themselves for an appropriate amount of time, they graduate to the next level of difficulty. So I wasn't surprised when my first lesson turned into my only lesson for every class. I worked on mastering this strand stroke for a month. How you strongly press your brush onto the rice paper in a perpendicular angle. How you glide it into a very subtle arc to the right, then gently let it up, leaving a tapered serif at the end of the kanji. But my shodo teacher never praised my efforts. Instead, she would give me what I learned was the universal Japanese reaction of politely avoiding difficult questions and awkward requests. Whenever I asked her to review my list of ichi, she'd do this. And while the shodo teacher probably just felt flustered to have an adult colleague who didn't speak Japanese in a room full of teenagers as a student, I didn't yet recognize all the complicated ways I existed outside of Japan's societal structure. So when she showed no hint of offering me anything beyond, I quit. I often entertain Japanese friends with this gaijin tale of hardship. And that's exactly what happened when a fellow teacher invited me to her parents' house. However, what I didn't realize was that her mother was the student of a well-known shodo teacher in the prefecture. The mother related my story to her master, and her master sent word that she'd teach me the proper way to do Japanese calligraphy. That's how I end up spending a day with Hinako. Later, I'll learn how much my preconceptions about her are wrong. I'll even learn how much she loves to fly light aircraft in states like Montana. But right now, she reminds me of many of the other well-to-do Japanese women I know with husbands and homes. She is modestly attired, and even though I suspect she is closer to my mother's age, her makeup is fresh, and her bobbed hair is still dark, softly framing her face in curls. This will be a fun lesson, Hinako says in Japanese. We're sitting in her bright living room at a low table with brushes and paper before us. Write whatever you want, Hinako says. I decide to write my favorite character, Sora, which means sky. Like a good teacher, Hinako demonstrates how I should hold a brush and dab it into the India ink. She then draws the 9 strokes that equate my kanji. I obediently copy her. Hinako says, digesting my work intensely. It's not very good. I expect this. It's just kind of boring, she says. I do not expect that. Calligraphy, Hinako explains, is not about stroke order, rote, or regulations. It is about hyogen, emotion and expression. There's nothing wrong with being correct, she says in Japanese, but only if that is the feeling you want to express. She points out how her brushstrokes are smooth and even manage to look a little mischievous. But my lines, on the other hand, are so deliberate they could crack. Let's write the character for heart, she says. She shows me how if I use fat and bold strokes to write kokoro, my heart will seem energetic. But if my strokes are feathery, my heart might appear whimsical or even vulnerable. We draw more skies. Hinako draws the moon and stars in an evening sky on white paper. Tsuki, Hoshi, and Yoru. She brushes the kanji for moon and star in the upper corners of the paper, and the one for evening in a lower corner. She leaves the last corner blank to represent the vastness of the night sky. I keep sliding sheets under her brush with new demands. I challenge her to make a kuro, which causes Hinako to shudder. Black is not a happy thing in Japanese, she says. But I find it to be so beautiful, I say. I explain how I think of black always in association with the night, and Hinako slams her brush onto the page so the ink splatters. Her brush strokes are so thick I can't even see where they begin and end. I tease her to make a mysterious kuro. And she laughs, saying how this is a new exercise even for her. Hours later, with the Japanese night dominating the sky, we then stand in her bathroom, washing our hands free of stains. I remember feeling buzzed. I didn't know calligraphy could be like this, I say in Japanese. I scrub hard at a black splotch on my thumb. That's because we aren't just student and teacher, Hinako says to me in the mirror. We are artist to artist, and this makes me love her even more. Owaride.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Fascinating.
Yes. All right, so let's continue. Okay. All right, so next on our agenda.
Getting lots of applause for Sarah in the comments, by the way.
Oh,
yeah. Yes, thank you, everyone. We will be taking questions at the end for both of our speakers as well. So please have some questions in mind. So next on our agenda, we have Natalie Hamilton. Natalie Hamilton, she is a writer, a teacher, and a translator. She lived in Oita Prefecture for 3 years as an assistant language teacher on the JET program. And when she returned to Sydney, she studied translation. She currently teaches translation technology at Western Sydney University. About her book. Intermediate students of Japanese are well aware of the term on reading and know that memorizing kanji readings is one of the biggest hurdles when learning to read Japanese. The Kanji Code provides a wealth of information to help learners tackle this difficult aspect of kanji study. And based on research Natalie undertook while living and studying in Japan, the book aims to make learning kanji less overwhelming and more fun. And in March of 2019, her textbook, The Kanji Code, was named one of the best new Japanese resources by Tofugu, the makers of the Wanikani kanji learning app. So with that said, Natalie, the stage is yours.
Arigatou gozaimasu. And by the way, I think we forgot to mention that John was also in Oita Prefecture, right?
All Oita Jets.
All Oita former Jets. Go Oita! Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction. All right, I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to give you a mini kanji lesson. Now, I will set my timer because I can get carried away with kanji and I can probably talk for the whole hour, but I will not. Okay. Is that going to launch? I want it to be full screen. Here we go. Okay, so the Kanji Code. Yes. I'm going to give you a mini masterclass in kanji. Very mini. So first of all, I just want to, it's important to know about the 4 kinds of kanji. So the one that we hear about the most, especially when we're beginners, is pictographs. And these are those kanji that look like the thing they represent. For example, a person and a tree. And these are definitely the easiest ones to learn. Then we have ideographs. And these are ones that are a visual representation of a concept, such as up and down. Then we have compound ideographs. And this is where you get two or more components. So here we've got a person. This is the same as the person up the top. By the way, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Great. So this is the same as this person, but it's just the squashed version where it goes on the side. And then we have the tree here, and this is a person sitting by a tree. And when you put that together, it means to rest, yasumu. So that's a very kind of logical third meaning that comes from putting two other components together. And often when you know these radicals, these components, the meaning is quite logical and quite poetic too. If you're into poetry, as I know you are, Sarah, kanji's great for anyone into poetry or especially visual learners. Okay, but the fourth type is keisei moji. And you may not be as familiar with that one. I certainly wasn't when I got to Japan, and I didn't learn about them in high school either. I did Japanese in high school here in Sydney. So a keisei moji is where one component gives you a hint to the meaning, and that's the radical, and then the other component gives you a hint to the reading or pronunciation, and that's what we call a phonetic component. And it may surprise you to learn that 80 to 90% of the Joyo kanji, which are the daily use kanji, actually are keisei moji. So what does this term even mean, keisei moji? Let's break it down. So kei means form or shape. Sei is the kanji for voice. And moji means character. So linguists like to call these semasiophonetic characters, but that's a bit of a mouthful. So I tried to come up with my own new translation, and I call them a kanji in which the form or shape gives a clue to the sound or the voice. And so I call them form sound characters. So how does a form sound character work? Well, the radical tells you the meaning category. So for example, this is the radical water, and when it's squished on the side, it becomes these three dots called sanzui. And it appears in these three kanji, which all relate to, you guessed it, water. We've got swim, river, and bubble. Then the other part of keisei moji is the phonetic. The phonetic gives you a hint to the pronunciation. So we've got the same kanji here.
I'm going to interrupt and say for the non-Japanese speakers that kanji is hard because it has several pronunciations, and this is why what Natalie is doing is really cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Yes, that is one of the challenges for sure. Each kanji, well, some kanji actually only have one reading, but then you don't get to those ones usually until you're really advanced. So you can get the impression that every kanji has 10, plus readings. But yes, so this is where my idea came from, to try to make this working out the sound a bit easier. So if you learn, so for these ones, they've all got the same radical, they're all water related, but they've got a different phonetic. And these phonetics here give you a hint to the sound. A, that one goes to A, this one goes to ka, and this one says or. If you learn those, it makes reading them a lot easier. So this is again to swim, and we've got water, we've got A, and when we put it together in a compound word, we get sui-a, which means swimming. Once you learn that A is A, you can read far more kanji words. The other one, ka, means river, and it contains this phonetic ka, and it goes in this word kasen, which means river or stream. And here, sun, I've taken this from Sarah's beautiful reading. The phonetic, the radical is sun, and the phonetic is jaw. Now this is one, not all the phonetics are entirely reliable. Some of them have exceptions. And this is one of them, but I just wanted to pull out one from your reading. And this is jaw here. And when we put it together in this word, it's a myo jaw, which is morning star. So star, of course, the sun makes sense in star, and birth is the meaning of the other character. So it helps to think of radicals and phonetics as the yin and yang of kanji. Radicals giving you the meaning hints and phonetics giving you the reading hints. I recommend you learn the radicals by subject. So you can learn all the nature ones, tree, moon, sun, and body parts and weapons. And that way it just makes it a bit more easy to learn and remember. And these are it's an investment to learn the radicals. There's 216 in all. So I know that's a bit intimidating, but if you only learn, say, the top 50 most used, it certainly will help you. For example, kanji that have the hand in them are usually related to things you do with your hand, actions like hitting, picking up. And kanji with this little thing, this is the heart, are usually related to emotions and feelings. It's actually extremely logical system. And learning the phonetics takes the guesswork out of reading kanji for sound. So for example, say, for, chu, and ken. If you learn those, you'll be reading much faster than if you just try to rote learn them, which is sort of the way that it can be taught in some places. So on my website, I've got a free list of these phonetics that you can just have a look at and try to learn, just the same as you learn your hiragana and katakana. I've given them a name because I just think that helps us to learn things. I know I'm running out of time. I've also got a list of the radicals by subject and that are here. You can easily find them from my website with the Japanese name. And here's just a couple of screenshots. So in the book, I've just listed these phonetics and I give example kanji that contain them. If we zoom in, so I've got about 61 pages like this with 150 phonetic components in total, and for each phonetic you get at least 2 kanji that contain it and the meaning of it and some example words and the pronunciation. I've also got a section on how you may not know, but hiragana and katakana were actually based on kanji. Who knew? I certainly didn't know when I was in high school. And so, for example, katakana te, this letter here, or not letter, but script, and this hiragana te are both based on the same kanji ten, which means heaven. So by learning that, seeing as you already know your hiragana and katakana, those of you who are learning Japanese, that's going to help you learn the reading for this kanji. So it all kind of comes together. So I've got a whole section on that. I've got about 14 pages of those where you can sort of leverage your existing kana knowledge to learn the readings of some kanji. I even have, this is my most creative section, I've gathered together kanji that have similar visual features. For example, crescent and a square, and they all have the reading may. This is something that you might find useful. Okay, I think my time is just about up. I've got 30 seconds left on my timer, but getting a chat. Okay, so that's my presentation. You can get all those resources on my website.
Whenever I go through this book, I think about when I was on the JET program learning Japanese, is that it was just you memorize the kanji. You started from the top and you memorize down, and there are thousands, it feels like, of kanji. And so this is the fun thing for me to watch here as authors, and we'll talk about this more in the Q&A, is that I've been watching Natalie try and figure out this puzzle for over 10 years, and I got to see the early drafts of the Kanji Code and see her do it. So it's just super cool that she was able to articulate this.
Thanks, Sarah.
Absolutely. I too have spent so long learning kanji, and I still, it's a lifelong journey. That's how I do it with kanji. There's thousands of characters, and it can be a little daunting.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for that. To both of you.
My pleasure.
Great. otsukaresama desu. So now I'm going to jump into the Q&A portion of our event. And so prior to the event, there was a Google form that was sent out with some questions that you folks would like to ask Sarah and Natalie. And so I'll be kind of acting as the moderator, going through the responses that we received and kind of pick and choose questions that are relevant to today's talk. But let's start with some basic questions about...
I do want to say, John, as well, that if you have questions that you're not hearing, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And if we don't get to them, Natalie and I will try and follow up afterwards. We're definitely curious to hear what everybody's about and to continue interacting with you guys after.
Absolutely, yes. The chat room is open, so please feel free to, type in your responses there. Or there is actually the Q&A feature that is available directly on this webinar. Please feel free to use that as well. All right, so the first question is for Sarah. So how did you come up with Dearest Enemy?
So as John said in the introduction, it was inspired by correspondence that a friend and I wrote while I was in Japan. So for those who have been on the JET program or for anybody who's ever lived abroad, especially in a country where you don't speak the language natively, I knew no Japanese when I went to Oita. It's really, it scrambles your brain and it really is disorienting, and it was really hard to kind of find your identity. And so my identity so much before I left the United States was I am a writer and I am really good at poetry and words. And when I was in Japan, I got to a point where I forgot how to spell the simplest words. I remember trying to write the word pamphlet and spelling it P-A-M-F-E-T. And it was wrong, but I just couldn't figure out why it was wrong. So my friend and I, we would write each other these really poetic letters as if we were enemies, to kind of give a sense of like, my dearest enemy, I hate you so much. The sky is blue. I had cottage cheese today, the end. And I just always really liked the writing that we did. And the wedding part is that over the course of this correspondence, she asked me to write a wedding poem for her. And I was like, well, I don't know how to write a nice wedding poem for you because I just want to insult you. So the overall story is how I come to write a wedding poem for my friend at her wedding, even though we write to each other as enemies. So it was a long process, much like Natalie's Kanji Code, where it took her many years. We started doing this when I was in college before I left for JET, but I didn't actually write the book until 10 years later when I was in grad school, and I had all the pieces, kind of my own Kanji Code. I had my own puzzle to put together on how I could share this with people.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. Natalie, how about yourself? How did you come up with the idea of Kanji Code?
Well, I suppose it was just from trying to fill a gap in what there was. So Angie, thank you, has given us a question, which is pretty much, I can answer that. Did I feel like there was a huge gap in teaching kanji? Well, yeah, in a way. I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on meaning, and there's a lot of great books that tell you about learn the meaning, and there's a picture. There's this great book, Kanji Pictographs by Michael Rowley, which shows you little pictures and comes together. And so there's a lot of emphasis on that, and there's a lot of emphasis on the radicals and on those pictographs. So when you're a beginner, you think, oh, all kanji just look like the thing they represent, and then you get a bit further in and you think, oh no, they're actually really hard. And a lot of people just freak out and get kanji overwhelmed. That actually did happen to me, because I studied Japanese in high school from year 7 to 10, and I really liked it, but I ended up dropping it because when I looked at how much kanji I was going to have to learn to finish high school, I'd already learned 300 and I had to learn another 500 or 600, and I was like, oh no, too hard, and I dropped it, and I ended up doing high level maths instead, because I just felt like that would be easier, because I wasn't being given enough clues. We were just given the list and said learn it, and it wasn't, you know what I mean?
I want to add as well, for me, I read 200 kanji. So it feels really hard what you're talking about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. but yeah, so it was kind of a gap. And I was looking around, I was asking people, hey, because we had some great senpai. And the great thing about being on the JET program is you have these people who've been there a year or two before you that you can talk to. And there's such a great support while you're there. But I was asking them, hey, I've noticed some of these kanji have got the same, you know, all the ones with say in them seem to be pronounced say. Is there a list somewhere of this that I could find? And people were like, no, you just have to learn them. And that's where I was like, no, there must be a list. I'll make one. So I just sat down and kind of made my list. And that's what I wanted to share through the book.
Great, thank you. So I have a question for both of you. And it's regarding depicting life in Japan and the Japanese culture. When you were writing your books, what was your first priority in depicting this part of Japan, the life and its culture, its people?
Yeah.
Maybe Sarah, that's probably more relevant for Sarah, but
well,
you can take it.
I think it's relevant for you too, because you wanted to, the thing that I found most fascinating about your journey is that you talked about how there was such a convention on how to learn kanji, and you had to really kind of push against that, of like the foreign experience is really important, and being a foreigner teaching kanji. And I think that's an interesting way that you've entered your book. And then for me, I think that it's, I would tell people, like, I feel like there are kind of 4 categories of people when they come to Japan. And a lot of people tend to go to Japan and they write just being there for a week or just being there for like a month. And that's a really interesting experience, but it's a different experience than someone who's there for a few years or someone who's there for like decades. And so I think when I was thinking of the pieces that I wanted to put in my book, it was less about like the weirdness of Japan as we think about, you know, as non-Japanese people, and more about like this sense of identity and this sense of like trying to find your footing in language and understanding. And I felt like I learned so much in Japan about what it means to speak a foreign language, even when you're speaking your native language, and looking at it differently and how to articulate and express yourself. I have this one story as a teacher. I have a couple stories of me as a teacher in my book. Is I felt like my students were constantly learning English in a very formulaic methodology way, probably like, you know, students here when it comes to learning Japanese. And I wanted to have them use English in a way that was very different, that they didn't know. So in one of the lessons I loved the most, I had all my students murder me, actually. And they wrote alibis and accusations, and they really, really got into it, honestly. And I was just so proud that they went looking for like, you know, like, oh no, we didn't kill Sarah because like I had soccer practice at the time and it was right around the corner and he has a mean look. Like that was just so much fun. And that's what I took so much from my experience in JET. And I think I wanted to bring, especially because the correspondence with my friend was about using language in an interesting way to make us feel joy and delight. And so I wanted to explore that here too.
Yeah, and I love the way, I mean, I think that you really focus on the shared humanity between, you know, like going to Japan. I think if you're there and you only go for a week, it might be easy to say, oh, those Japanese are so weird. But I think the nice thing in your book is that you kind of focus on, yes, some of those initial experiences were alienating, like when you hurt your back and you're trying to figure it out at the pharmacist. But then, you know, gradually as you get to know the teachers, you're talking about, there's that nice scene where you know, one of the students is ribbing you in front of the Japanese male teacher and saying, you know, do you like him? And then you say, oh, you know, I love him, and then he says he loved you too.
Jaws on the
And I really related to that, you know, like reading your book just took me back to all those experiences that was very intense. But ultimately the thing I got is that, you know, humans are humans, you know, ningen wa ningen da, and the things that separate us, eventually when you get past that, you can see that we're all just people.
Great.
And yeah, and I'll just, to what you said earlier about, the journey I went on, it was, I think I kind of came back and I did my master's in translation, and I did this linguistics dissertation as kind of a fun thing because I still have my kanji cards I've used several years before in Japan, and I did that as an assignment at uni, but it got a very sort of lukewarm response basically. And like looking back on it now, I think my first draft, I just hadn't really nailed the whole academic research genre at all. But also I think my supervisors just somehow didn't really get it as well, what I was saying. Maybe I just didn't tell them well enough, but I did have some resistance, and I went around to a couple of different unis, and I with like a little PowerPoint, and I said, I've got this idea for how to teach kanji, and I just pretty much got like, you're crazy, that won't do. I had one very sort of, pretty much, had one quite senior, wasn't Japanese, but she was like an academic of Japanese at a very prestigious university here, who was like, there's no point in having a book just about sound with kanji, it needs to have sound and meaning. And I kind of went away going, oh yeah, maybe I'm crazy. So I lost confidence after that, and it took me a few years when I still kept Googling, is there a list of phonetics? And I noticed that, here and there would be more and more little comments and questions in various blogs, and I just thought, well, this idea is there, but still no one has fully done it. And another Japanese teacher called Hiroko Townsend, I should mention, she did her thesis, which was much better thesis than mine, and she also identified a number of phonetics, which I do refer to, and I contacted her and we're in touch. She's in the States too. And that was the point, I think 2017, I was like, this really is a real thing, I didn't just make this up. And that's when I said, I'm going to go for it. And so I'm so glad I did, because, I've had pretty good response. So I think it has actually filled a bit of a gap.
Well, great for your persistence.
Thanks. Yeah.
Especially when learning a language.
Well, I think you need persistence, and that's something we learn in Japan too, isn't it? You wouldn't stay in Japan for more than a year if you weren't a kind of persistent, tenacious type, would you?
Right. We have a question regarding, your language abilities, Natalie. This is a question for you. We have some folks asking, how long did it take for you to become comfortable speaking Japanese conversationally, as well as with the kanji?
Yep. Yes, I am fluent. I was living in Japan for 3 years, so I was especially fluent then, because I was just using it every day. Had lots of Japanese friends, and yes, I do, but it took a while. I had already done like 3 years in high school, but then when I got to Japan, I realized that they don't use the des mas form for starters. So all the teachers around me were like, iku, doko ni iku, and I'm like, what's that? Because that's ikimasu in high school. So pretty much was start from when I got to Japan, restart 3 years, but I was pretty like nerdy about it, wasn't I? Sarah will remember. I was that sort of mature age jet, and I was like hitting the books after like the first 8 months.
So many note cards with yourself all the time. So.
Yeah, I had kanji all over my apartment. I was doing the kanji kente. I had it stuck on the toilet. I had it in the shower. I don't know. I just went all out, because I just really, it was just such an amazing feeling once you started, because when you're immersed in it, like you said, I was the same. I was a word person, and to get there and not be able to express myself was very frustrating, and I just went quite silent for months. But then when I started to learn to read again, it was almost like a sense of deja vu of when I was 5 and I learned to read. And it's like the whole world opens up to you, and you're not constantly confused.
Same experience.
So that was very motivating.
Yes.
So about 3 years, but very intensive study.
Yes, simply the desire to function in society is good enough motivation to learn a new language in that country.
Exactly.
Yes, I agree. I can relate. We have a question about your writing styles. This is kind of for both of you. How has the duality of living in two countries, two continents, how has that shaped your career paths and your writing styles?
お先にどうぞ。
Let's see. I think, like with my career paths, I'd say the JET program is the most influential thing in my life. I can pinpoint so many decisions and reasons why I've done things based to the skills and the life experiences I had there. It goes to what Natalie was saying, is that we have to be very persistent in Japan. For a lot of us, myself, and especially for me, it was the first time I was a minority. I couldn't speak Japanese. I didn't know the culture. And so you're starting from square one. Like I went and visited my brother in Japan before I started the JET program. And I remember confronting my first super toilet and I couldn't figure out how to flush it. And I needed to go find him to be like, I don't know where the button is. And so when you're going so back to square one of just like, how do I eat? How do I wash my hands? How do I, how do I find things? As Natalie was saying, there's a story in my book where my first couple weeks I was in Japan, I actually really hurt my back. And so I needed to find aspirin. And like, I don't know what a pharmacy looks like. I don't know how to say aspirin in Japanese. So you have to just figure it out because nobody's going to help you.
I remember that. You were just like holed up in your apartment while we were out sort of touring. It was really bad.
Oh, it was really bad. I hadn't met anyone in the JET community yet. Like the great thing is the JET community is just so fantastic and so great. And so I feel like that served me so well, that tenacity, as I've moved on in my career, because in career switching and coming on to new jobs, in asserting myself and setting expectations. I was in a school where I had no guidance or supervision. So they basically gave me a blank slate to do whatever I wanted. And I was just 21 years old. I had no teaching degree. And I was just like, they just kind of threw me in front of, 1,000 students and were like, well, start talking. You speak English. And I stayed for 2 years. So there you go. In my writing style, I think it's definitely affected how I write, and that I have this, it continued to make very clear to me this interest in meaning and language and perception. And I became really aware in Japan about this great skill of translation and how translation really affects how you understand culture. I read a lot of books by Japanese authors who were translated into English. And I remember reading Haruki Murakami and thinking like, he sounds like an American in my head, but that's also because he's bilingual and he's able to handle his translations. Whereas other authors, they would be translated by other people, and it was interesting to see like the decisions that they made, because I was in the culture. And so I was able to be like, well, I don't know if I would have used, like, I understand what they're talking about, but I don't know if I would have used those words. And really kind of the big one for me also was Arthur Golden's Memoirs of a Geisha came out while we were in Japan. Do you remember that, Natalie? The movie?
Yeah.
And I was just like, I can tell that this is a white guy who's writing this. Like, not a, like, no, like it's hard to write in a different perspective and different culture, but it was just something that was even more obvious to me, because I was like, a Japanese person would not, I feel like a Japanese geisha would not necessarily be focused on these things or as interested in like the things that they're talking about. And I think this goes to what Natalie was saying of just being there, you kind of absorb all this stuff that you can't really express. And then when you leave, you take it with you. And I think it just makes you more sensitive and more aware, because when I came back to the States, especially in California, like I grew up in California, I'm here in Los Angeles, and I was like, oh my gosh, like so many people speak Spanish. And it just always been there, but I was suddenly listening now and aware.
Yeah. Yes. And for me, yeah, I mean, I think it was a huge life-changing experience in so many ways. It was very challenging in some ways, being the foreigner, as you say, being the minority. I was in an even smaller town because I was out in Nakatsu, which is like 70,000, small town outside of Oita, which is already a small prefecture, nowhere near Tokyo. This was rice paddies and fields and crabs crawling down the street and snakes and things, like mountains. Beautiful countryside, but I was a city girl. I was from Sydney and I lived in London. So this was like, I think half the culture shock was just being in the country. But also like people, this was, you know, nearly 20 years ago, and there weren't many foreigners at all there then, and most people couldn't speak English. And people would literally, when I walked into my local shop, they would all kind of stop and gawk, like I was an alien. And that was very confronting for me. And I guess I have a sensitive nature. So I was just a bit like affected by that at first. And there were some weekends where I just didn't leave my house, I'll be honest, because I was just like, I can't deal with being the gaijin this weekend. But at the same time, I pushed through it, I got through it, and then I started to love it. And I had so much support from other Jets, but also teachers at the school and the students. And I think a lot of the students picked up that I was a bit, you know, freaked out or lonely, and they would give me these beautiful little notes. Hi, my name is Baba. I like Avril Lavigne, or something like that. Or, you know, they would give, I had a student giving me CDs of Japanese pop music, and I was so touched by it. And it was such a beautiful experience and communication that it just kind of opened me up to something different. And I think there's just like a very sweet, sentimental side to Japanese people. You know, teachers crying when the students graduated, you know, which you wouldn't see here in Australia. So kind of, yeah, it just changed the way I saw a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to kind of begin wrapping up this Q&A portion so that we have a little bit more time for some final announcements at the end. And I'm going to end it with a fun little question. Let's see. What are some, let's see here, where did it go? Yeah. What unique or types of obscure foods from Japan do you still crave? How do you feel about Kewpie mayonnaise on French fries?
Before jet program, disgusting. After jet program, yeah, let's do it. Kewpie mayonnaise.
Yeah.
Still actually sometimes miss the idea of, oh my gosh, help me out, jet community on the chat. What was the name of the pizza place where you get corn and seaweed and mayonnaise?
Yeah.
Oh, that was like
just Japanese pizza.
So good.
Corn on pizza, yeah. You liked it? I was not a fan, gotta say, but
not in the beginning, but I definitely
converted. Pietro. We've got a Pietro.
Oh, I don't think that's it. I'll have to But actually, it's funny for that question because when I was leaving Japan, I was with a fellow Jet at the World Fair in Nagoya, and a woman who was writing a Japanese cookbook came up to ask us that question. And you know, like what non-sushi food we want. And I would definitely say Japanese pumpkin, kabocha, fantastic. I still crave and miss Japanese Italian food, actually, like Japanese carbonara. And there was this amazing Genovese pasta at this place near our Aikido place. And especially shout out to the Oita Jets. Like my favorite chimichanga still comes from Ethnic Bros in City.
Yeah, we got a shout out to all our
Don, you know what I'm talking about?
Friends.
All there, yes.
Ethnic Bros, yeah.
I think for me, I have to say karaage, because Nakatsushi, where I lived, is actually called the Karaage no Seichi, which is like the hometown of karaage. It has the most karaage stands of any town in Japan, and it's a very small town. And karaage was, there's a debate, but some say Beppu, some say Usa had the first specialist karaage town. I've just been researching this. The first specialist shop for karaage. So actually, it's now everywhere. It's gone global, but that is Oita food.
Hey.
So, and I just made some for an assignment, and it was so good. So definitely, and mayonnaise, not such.
The karaage is making me think I still really miss Japanese just festival food. Walking into a festival and getting your oh my gosh, yakisoba and your takoyaki in the chat. Oh my gosh, so good. And all the that was everywhere.
Which one?
All the soft serve. There was a lot of soft serve.
Yeah, they know how to celebrate, really, in Japan, festivals.
I once went on a soft serve rally in Oita. In Taketa, which is like down south in Oita, and there were over 20 different flavors of soft serve going around the town, and so the mission was to like carry around a little stamp card and visit all these like soft serve camps. We couldn't finish it all in one day. I only went with one friend, but they had great flavors, you know, like the typical run-of-the-mill, like chocolate, vanilla, milk, all that. But the most unique one was soft shell turtle.
Ooh.
Ice cream. It was actually disgusting.
As you'd expect.
It was like salty. It tasted like ocean.
Umami.
No, definitely not, huh?
Was there a yuzu one? I bet there was a yuzu.
I don't know if there was a yuzu one, but there were some. They're like black sesame.
It was a turtle one. I love black sesame ice cream.
Miso was the best one. Miso. There was a miso flavored one. Alrighty, so let's wrap up our event. I know that you folks had a very book giveaway to some of our filled out the Google form. So Sarah, Natalie, would you like to announce the winner?
The Dearest Enemy giveaway winner is Lucy Was, and I will be contacting you by email after this event.
Hey, and the Kanji Code winner is Helen Dubrovich. So congratulations. I'll get in touch with you and get you a copy too.
Otherwise, yeah, like we would love to thank everybody for RSVPing and for showing up. We're really touched and really appreciative of your time and your support. We're going to send an email out after this with links to Amazon where you can purchase our books. That's the best way to support our work is through Amazon. Natalie and I are both self-published through the platform.
I just posted the links on the chat as well.
Great.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah. And if you have if you read the books and if you like the books, we'd super awesome love a review on Amazon.
Yes. I think the author review is there. The Goodreads link. Yeah. It does really help because actually, like on Book Depository, the rating your book goes relates back to Goodreads. So the more sort of better reviews you get, the better it looks when people go searching.
We got actually a lot of, we barely got to touch on them. So Natalie and I are gonna collaborate a little bit in Confab, and we'll back with a couple more answers because they were really good. Yeah,
thanks everybody for your questions and your interest. It's so nice to, even when we can't see you, we can see your comments, and it's nice to connect in this very strange world and year we're living in. It's really nice to sort of feel, even though we're all in our homes, feel connected. So, arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you to John and to the JET alumni.
Yes, thanks, John. And thanks, JETAASC, for all your support. It's a JETAASC.
Yes, of course. Well, all right. Well, that about wraps up our event. Again, the links to the books, Dearest Enemy and Kanji Code, are in the chat, and we will also send out an email, follow-up email with the links. And yes, we thank you so much for attending today. And I wish you, Sarah and Natalie, the best with your book sales, and I hope your stories go out, and yeah, great stories and great language learning resources. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that wraps up our event. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day. Bye, everyone.
ありがとうございます。さようなら。
お疲れ様です。